So the prisoner's dilemma is a classic game. If you've heard about game theory before, very often it's going to have been in the context of the prisoner's dilemma. It gets talked about a lot because, one, because it's really kind of interesting, but two, there are a lot of situations in life that are prisoner's dilemmas, and they are dilemmas, as we'll see. And so there's been a lot of effort sort of spent sort of talking about how we can resolve the dilemma that is the prisoner's dilemma in the many places that we see it arise. So it doesn't have to be about prisoners. You don't have to be arrested to play the prisoner's dilemma. It's just one of the first times this was sort of publicly talked about, way decades and decades and decades ago. The example was two prisoners, and it's easy to get your head around with that. So think there's this guy Fred, and he's going to rob the 7-Eleven on Pershing, and he's walking to the 7-Eleven, and he sees this guy sitting on the side of the road and doesn't know him. That's important to the story. He doesn't know him, but he looks like somebody who might want to rob the 7-Eleven, and Fred could use backup. So he's like, dude, want to go rob the 7-Eleven? And this dude happens to be Barney, and Barney says, sure, I got nothing else to do. So they go, they rob the 7-Eleven, there's stuff that happens, there's some injuries to the clerk, stuff happens. Anyhow, they flee, they get picked up, they get taken down separately in separate cop cars down to the police station in downtown, and they get put in separate interrogation rooms. So they're in separate rooms, they don't know each other, they're not in gangs together, they're just random criminals who don't know each other. So the police officer says, Fred, you have two choices. Obviously, you can tell me that you did it, because we know you did, or you can just keep quiet. And clearly you're planning to keep quiet because you're not actually saying anything. But it'd be a lot easier if you just confessed. We could get this all over with. There's no trial. It saves us everything. Could you just tell us you did it? And of course, Fred says nothing. And you're like, Fred, you know that other guy was with you. We have him too. We picked him up also. So he's in the other room, and what do you think? Do you think he's going to keep quiet? Oh, you probably do, because that's what criminals do, right? The criminal code of ethics. Everyone just doesn't rat out anyone. Even you don't even know the guy. You don't even know his name, do you, Fred? No, you don't. His name's Barney, or it may not be. You don't even know him. You wouldn't know, right? So you think he's in there keeping quiet, and you think you're keeping quiet, and you all think you're so smart doing your criminal keep quiet thing. You've got a rap sheet. You've got priors. You were carrying a gun in violation of your probation. You were doing a lot of things, Fred. If you keep quiet and Barney keeps quiet, you're still going to prison for 2 years. And Barney's in the same spot. He's like you. So if you guys do this, you're both going to still go to prison. I can guarantee it. I got enough. But I see what you're thinking. You're not dumb, Fred, right? So I see what you're thinking. If you both confess and you say, yes, we did it, and we assaulted the store clerk and all of that. He's in the hospital, by the way. Then you're going to go to prison longer. But if you confess, we'll try to go kind of easy on you, because we don't have to have a trial, and we don't have to do all that stuff, and it can go really quickly, and we can put it in the news right away that we have this confession, and just good PR. So you go to prison for 7 years. I can see what you're thinking. Still, I'd rather go to prison for just 2 years than go to prison for 7 years. You're not done. Okay. And you think Barney's thinking the same thing, right? He'd rather go to prison for 2 years than 7 years. So of course you're just going to keep quiet. Obviously, both of you keeping quiet is better than both of you confessing. That is clear. But you think Barney's sticking to the criminal code of ethics, but you don't know Barney. Barney has an infant daughter. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. You don't know. Let's say he does. Barney has an infant daughter. If he goes to prison for 2 years, she's going to walk, she's going to talk, she's going to do all that stuff, and he's not going to see her. Or not regularly, certainly. So Barney has very graciously offered to tell us all about what happened in the 7-Eleven. He's in there writing his confession now, saying he was in the 7-Eleven buying diapers for his baby daughter, minding his own business, when you busted in and started beating people up and throwing your gun around and stealing money. And Barney was just there as an innocent bystander. And his testimony is going to be so powerful, And Fred, if we have to go to trial on this for you, we're going to be kind of pissed off. So yeah, we'll have all that, and we'll have Barney's eyewitness testimony, and you're going to prison for 15 years. And Barney can go home tonight and see his baby girl. Suddenly, Barney's looking at 2 years if you both keep quiet, but if you, Fred, keeping quiet, and Barney confesses, if he throws you under the bus, he gets no time. Especially if he has an infant daughter, that's looking pretty attractive. Maybe Barney doesn't want to keep quiet. I see you getting a little nervous, Fred. Maybe Barney doesn't want to keep quiet. Maybe he does, but maybe he doesn't. You can see why he might want to take that deal. Looks a little bit attractive. Well, Fred, maybe Barney is as stubborn as you. Maybe he's being obstinate and not talking also. I'm happy to give you that deal. I know you both did it. I got to put it on someone. I could put it on both of you. I could put it on you. Or if Barney keeps quiet, you tell me all about how he did it. You tell me all about how he busted in there. And we can, because frankly, as long as somebody goes to prison, I'm good with it. We'll send him to prison, because I know you both did it. It's not like I'm pinning on an innocent person. I know you both did it. Somebody's going to prison. If you help me convict him, you can go home. Tell me how you were in there buying something, ice cream for your poor sick mother. And then you can go home and be with your poor sick mother and not in prison for the next 2 years, which would break her heart. Think about it. What do you think, Fred? If you were Fred, and remember, you don't know Barney, so don't say, well, if I knew Barney or if something, you are Fred. These are your payoffs. There's no other utility or disutility entering in. These are your payoffs, and your goal is to minimize prison time. So we're saying you don't enjoy going to prison. Your goal is to minimize prison time. That's the only thing that's entering into your utility function. What do you do? Take a second. You might just want to pause the recording. Think about it. A lot of times what people say is, well, it depends. Like if it depends on what Barney's going to do, because if he's going to keep quiet, then maybe, but it really doesn't. It doesn't. If Fred's goal is to minimize prison time, if Barney's going to confess, Fred could confess also and get 7 years, or Fred could keep quiet and go to prison for 15 years. If Barney's going to confess, Fred's best response is to confess also. That's his best choice. If Barney's going to confess, Fred's looking at 7 or 15, Fred's going to go with the 7. But if Barney keeps quiet, so sometimes people say, well, it depends because if Barney's going to keep quiet, but if Barney's going to keep quiet, Fred could keep quiet and get 2 years, or he could confess and go home tonight. Fred has a dominant strategy to confess. Regardless of what Barney does, Fred gets less prison time if he confesses. And again, remember, we're on the assumption that the goal is to minimize prison time. So don't say, but he might feel bad. Nothing else enters into his utility function in this. We can change the game to take those things into account, but that's not what we're doing right here. If his goal is to minimize prison time, he has a dominant strategy to confess. And Barney's payoffs, they're symmetric. They're the exact same as Fred. So you can see, if Fred's going to confess, Barney could confess or keep quiet. Barney wants to confess. If Fred's going to keep quiet, Barney could keep quiet and go to prison for 2 years, or he could confess, send Fred up the river, and only get 0 years. Both Fred and Barney have a dominant strategy to confess. So our Nash equilibrium is defined in terms of the strategy, not the numbers, not the payoffs. Nash equilibrium is the strategy. So our Nash equilibrium is that Fred confesses and Barney confesses. The equilibrium is defined as the strategy pair that puts you in that cell where each player's any other cell somebody's saying, I wish I'd done something different. If they both keep quiet, they're each saying, oh man, if he's keeping quiet, I wish I would have just gone ahead and confessed. And if the one's confessing and you didn't, you're saying, oh man, if I knew he was confessing, I sure wish I would have. It's only at confess where they're both like, whew, given that he confessed, I'm glad I did too. That's the Nash equilibrium. What makes this a dilemma is what we can see, right? They would both be better off if they just both kept their mouth shut. But they both have a dominant strategy to confess. And so they both would be better off down here, but they end up at this equilibrium that is, in the lingo, suboptimal. That's the dilemma. The dilemma is with each person playing their dominant strategy, they end up at a strategy pair that makes them both worse off than they could be. Not just that one's worse off, one would rather be here and one would rather be somewhere else. It's not just saying each one of them would rather be somewhere else. They would both, there's a strategy combination that they both would prefer to where they ended up. But they both have dominant strategies to confess. And so they end up doing that, and the Nash equilibrium they end up in is not optimal. Again, you're not going to be prisoners, hopefully. I can't say. But there are a lot of situations, like we will see with firms and cartels and things like that, but all sorts of situations in which this prisoner's dilemma dynamic exists, in which people undertaking their dominant strategies end up in equilibria that make them all worse off. And we'll see that in another video.